Welcome once again to part 6 of this Zelda timeline attempt. Now up until now the timeline has been going quite well. Nearly every game has been placed easily in the timeline and seems straightforward. You might even be thinking to yourself that, hey, this isn't so hard, it all seems to go together like a puzzle. Well, that phase of the timeline is essentially over, and its death knell is ironically the first two Zelda games to have graced a Nintendo console, Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. When looking at classical Nintendo games, these two stand out. Not only were they in gold cases, but the games themselves were gold as well. To many, defeating these two games is part of a litmus test to determine if you are a true Nintendo fan and old-school gamer. While the second game was considered an oddity by many, due to its radical change in gameplay and design, it still pushed the boundaries of what the Nintendo platform was capable of in a way that few others ever did. The difficulty of placing these games stems from the fact that they were created in a different age of video game history than most of the others. In the glory days of the original Nintendo, much more was left up to the imagination of the player than is done today. This wasn't because the developers were lazy, but because of the lesser processing power and memory available to them during that time. As a result, it wasn't uncommon for a Nintendo game to really have no mention of what is going on in the story in the game itself, leaving it to the gamer to figure out what is going on. The end result of this means that there are many different possibilities for where to place at least the first game into the timeline, and nearly every placement will have some serious problems. Putting these games in the timeline is a matter of finding the best fit, realizing that a perfect fit is going to be pretty much impossible. Fortunately, we aren't quite in the realm of wild speculation when it comes to these two. That is because we do get a good chunk of the intro story given to us in the instruction manuals. Those who have watched this series from the beginning will remember the rules put forth in the first video included that instruction manuals would only be used as a last resort. Well, this is the case that stipulation was referring to. Fortunately, the English version of these instruction guides are very faithful translations of the original Japanese ones, and as such can be used without me having to take lessons in Japanese. In Legend of Zelda, we learn that Ganon is in command of an army and has attacked Hyrule, taken the Triforce of Power, and captured Zelda. Before being captured, however, Zelda broke the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 pieces, scattering them across the land to keep them from Ganon. Then she dispatched her nursemaid, Impa, to find someone who might have been able to defeat the Prince of Evil. Impa soon finds herself cornered, only to be saved in the nick of time by Link, who is told of Zelda's plight and sets off to save the world. When trying to place this game, we can look at several things. First is that Ganon is once again in this game, so we know that at the very least it takes place after Ocarina of Time. Second, the Master Sword does not make an appearance, making this one of the few games where only Ganon is present out of the two. Next is that the portion of the map where Ganon's lair is mentioned in the instruction manual as being Death Mountain. As the area around it is not flooded, we can reasonably say that this game occurs before the flood in the adult timeline, if it is indeed in the adult timeline at all. This, of course, creates the problem, much like from Twilight Princess, with an adult timeline placement, dealing with Ganon and the Triforce of Power. As Ganon has the Triforce of Power at the end of Ocarina in the adult timeline, he would not have needed to raise an army and then seize it again. This pretty much rules out the adult timeline as a placement for this game once again. In the Young Link timeline, there's pretty much one major question at this point. Does Legend of Zelda take place before or after Twilight Princess? In the intro in the manual, it shows that this is the new Link, who does not know Ganon, as Impa has to explain to him what is going on, meaning that this is not a direct sequel to the Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess. Unfortunately, there is nothing to really suggest where it goes from this point. Using Ganon and the Triforce of Power in a similar way as to the adult timeline is useless, as at the end of both games on this side of the timeline, have Ganon either losing the Triforce of Power or never possessing it in the first place. The lack of a Master Sword means that it can't be used, and we are left with our first real brick wall in this timeline. To place the original game in the timeline, we need to find another game that is directly related to it and use the two in tandem to place them both in the timeline. Which of course brings us to Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, as the most likely game to fit this criteria. Why is this? Well, let's put aside the real-world fact that when it was released, the only other game was the original, and it has the number 2 in its title, and look simply at what is canon from this game's instruction manual, and cross out possible games it's connected to as we go. The instruction manual tells us that this Link defeated Ganon. Also, at the start of the story, this Link does not have the mark of the Triforce of Courage on his hand. Next, we need a game in which not only does Link not have the Triforce of Courage, but he does not know anything about it, and the Triforce is never shown as it's hidden in a temple in this game. Finally, we need a game in which Ganon had an army at his command. When all of these prerequisites are factored in, only one game can be the predecessor to Zelda 2, and that's the original Legend of Zelda. So what can we glean from Zelda 2? What evidence can we find to help place it in the timeline? We'll examine all this and more in the next video.